Hey, it's been a while since I had a Friday video, but I finally have gotten around to it after getting some things taken care of. Like I said on Sunday, I got a job and a lot of that, and a lot of issues came up with that, with travel and all that fun stuff. But today I got three stories, and they're pretty depressing mostly. So let's jump right. So a little bit of housekeeping before I get into it. I'll start out with Secretary Price, now former Secretary Price, Jared Kushner, and Puerto Rico. So, starting out with former Secretary Price, Reuters reports today that U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price resigned under pressure from President Donald Trump on Friday in an uproar over Price's use of private charter planes for government business. His abrupt departure was announced an hour after Trump told reporters he was disappointed in Price's use of expensive plane travel and did not like the optics of it. So, a little bit of background on this. Tom Price, Secretary of Health and Human Services, he's been traveling around to a lot of different places, and to do that, he's been using private jets, and that's netted up to $400,000 that is being footed by the taxpayer. And here is a little bit of here's a chart posted by Politico showing you what the prices are in difference from, commercial flights, the commercial flights being zero, although they're being put at the zero mark, although they're not exactly going to be zero, but you get the idea. And then the red dot is the charter flight, and that and all those numbers add up to 400,000. However, Price is only going to pay for the price of his personal seats, which is $52,000, and that would pay for let's see, three of them at most. So it's concerning, especially since Politico reported that this is in breaking with precedent. So Price actually in the past was against using charter and private jets for congressmen, and so him using private jets himself is fairly hypocritical, and also it breaks precedent because when government officials do travel, unless it's absolutely necessary, they use public transportation, either public planes, trains, cars, and Price could have done a lot of these just as cheaply using those, especially when he was doing when he did a jaunt from DC to Pittsburgh. So that is important. Other important things when we really look at this, going on with Reuters, Trump currently trying to sell his tax plan and oversee federal response to devastation raked by three hurricanes, saw the price drama as an unnecessary distraction, and behind the scenes was telling aides what was he thinking, a source close to the president told Reuters. So, like it said, Trump is trying to do a lot of things to, try to have some semblance of competency, and it seemed to be paying attention to the American people. And I mean, it makes sense. The move, it's logical, and it also fits in with the draining the swamp, which Price is seemingly wallowing in. Additionally, Price also is a multimillionaire, so he feasibly could have paid for these private charters himself. Now, I think an important thing that was kind of brushed under the rug in this article is that Price has also been seen in the White House as having been ineffective in getting Congress to pass healthcare reform legislation, an effort that has fizzled on Capitol Hill. So this is why Price was brought in. He was supposed to be the guy who's been on Capitol Hill for years, who wants to repeal and replace Obamacare, aka the Affordable Care Act. Um, and he's been unable to do that. He's been unable to get the pieces together in the House and in the Senate to make sure that the repeal and replace is taken care of, and millions of people are kicked off of health insurance, and health insurance gets to do what it wants again. Um, so I think that is the bigger part of this story. I think Donald Trump is using the charter as an excuse, because I don't really think he cares. Because if he really did care, he wouldn't be spending all of this money, this taxpayer money, at Mar-a-Lago or at any of his other clubs that he keeps on going to on the weekends, and he wouldn't have. He would have made sure that Melania and Barron came with him to DC instead of having them stay in Trump Tower. Although, again, I understand why Melania may not want to have been spending time with her husband, especially in regards to the stories that came out after the Access Hollywood tape. Again, I think this is more a punishment for being unable to pass healthcare reform as opposed to being someone who has American taxpayers pay for his travel on private charters. Now, in other news, in White House incompetency, NPR reported on a story with Jared Kushner and private emails. Now, I'm going to jump to the bottom of the article and read out the statement presented by Kushner's lawyer. So, Mr. Kushner uses his White House email address to conduct White House business. Fewer than 100 emails from January through August were either sent to or returned by Mr. Kushner to colleagues in the White House from his personal email account. This usually forwarded news articles or political commentary, and most often occurred when someone initiated the exchange by sending an email to his personal rather than his White House address. All non-personal emails were forwarded to his official address, and all have been preserved in any event. So what this hullabaloo is about is Jared Kushner and several other White House officials currently have been using private email accounts instead of government email accounts. Now, this may sound familiar. This was what Hillary Clinton was criticized for during the last presidential election, and I completely understand. Personal email accounts aren't as secure as government email accounts are supposed to be, and on top of that is for public record. When you work for the people, everything that you every piece of correspondence you have is required to be archived for the public record going forward. Of course, with classified stuff, it's sealed for a certain amount of time before it's released for the public to see. Additionally, what a lot of people are ignoring is that Hillary Clinton set up a private email server when she came into the White House, and that server was not as secure, was about as secure as a Gmail account, which is something you get when you set up a YouTube account. So that's something to think about. YouTube, don't kick me off from being a partner. Anyways, potential in the future. Going further in this article from NPR, like I said, emails have been a central theme for Mr. Kushner's father-in-law, President Trump, who has repeatedly said that Democratic rival Hillary Clinton should face federal criminal charges over her use of private email while serving as Secretary of State. Like I said, Hillary Clinton was knocked for using a personal email account while Secretary of State and having a lot of that business go through her personal account. I do agree that she should have been reprimanded at the very least for using a personal email account, because a lot, like Comey came out and said, we found these classified things on this personal email that should have gone exclusively through her government email. Um, Now, I get why the Clintons set up this personal server and use personal emails to kind of protect themselves, because they quite understandably become paranoid because of all the investigations that surrounded them that ended up being complete bunk. Um, but again, she broke protocol, which isn't uncommon because that's happened for as long as email has been a thing, which has been about 30 years. Well, as long as email has been a thing, people have not done what they're supposed to in the government. Um, Going further, now this is something else that you might not uh, um, not many people might not pay attention to, but Politico reports, this is NPR quoting Politico, reports that Kushner set up a private family domain as he and his family were moving into power in the Washington, D.C., similar to the timing of Clinton's establishment of her private email address and server as she was joining President Obama's administration. So setting up a family domain, I'm not exactly great with computers, but I think that's similar, but slightly different to setting up an email server. So um, this is very similar to what happened with Hillary Clinton, and hopefully something comes of this. And actually, Politico reported on 28th that White House launches probe of private email accounts. The review began after a political report about senior White House officials using private email accounts for government work. That article basically goes over the same information, only expands it to the other officials that used it. Many of those officials are now former officials, being Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon chief amongst them. Um, Going forward, I think there should be some form of reprimand or punishment that is met out and should be made retroactive, going as far back as it possibly can, because this is a serious matter. And if we're going to threaten to lock up political opponents for using uh, private email stuff, private server, private email account for government business, it shouldn't just be for your political opponents. It should also be your people in your own party or administration. Uh, it should be objectively used and not used as a stick to beat your opponents. Um, but of course, that would make sense. Um, so yeah. Now going on to Puerto Rico. New York Times reported on September 28th that the Trump administration said on Thursday that it would temporarily waive a century-old shipping law for Puerto Rico that officials there said was hindering disaster relief efforts after Hurricane Maria. The waiver of the law, known as the Jones Act, comes as federal and local officials report more supplies trickling onto the increasingly desperate island. But the Trump administration remains under pressure to step up the recovery effort. And skipping down a little bit, uh, it is it is an act of justice. It would allow Puerto Ricans to rebuild and to have a cost of living that really, frankly, is affordable. Carmen Yulín Cruz, the mayor of San Juan, the capital of Puerto Rico, said on CNN on Thursday. Several members of Congress had requested the waiver earlier in the week, saying it would facilitate delivery of food, medicine, clothing, and other supplies to the island, which was devastated by Hurricane Maria and a little bit by Irma. The decision was made by Elaine Duke, the acting head of Homeland Security, and comes after Defense Secretary Jim Mattis determined that doing so would be in the interest of national defense, according to a Homeland Security spokesman. The waiver will be in effect for 10 days. So this is really important. Puerto Rico was recently hit quite heavily by Hurricane Maria, a little bit by Irma. Wasn't in the direct path, so it wasn't hit as hard. And this is good. Things have been quite desperate. There are reports when we can get them, since communication isn't exactly reliable anymore with Puerto Rico since the hurricane, that people are lining up in extremely long, almost sometimes quarter mile or longer long lines to get supplies, fuel, food, water, things of that nature. And stuff is coming in, but not as fast, and it's actually quite expensive because of the Jones Act. And just to give a little information on the Jones Act, it is a shipping law that says that all shipping to certain areas needs to be done by American flagged and American operated and ships. And so people in Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico, they have to get stuff from the stuff that comes into their ports has to originate in the United States. So for Puerto Rico, it has to start in Jacksonville, Florida. It has to be unloaded in Jacksonville, Florida, and then reloaded onto a ship bound for Puerto Rico. And it makes things prohibitively expensive, especially since it is an island, and island economies live and die by shipping and by importing and exporting. And since they're not really allowed to do as much exporting to the world as would say an island nation like the UK, it makes it pretty hard for their economy to recover or to even be viable. Now, New York Times explains that those opposed to the Jones Act, have long included officials and allies of Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico who say that the law increases shipping costs for goods from the mainland, which are then passed on to consumers. Its supporters include pro-defense groups and members of the domestic shipping industry whose interests it protects. So, shipping obviously gets a boost from this because you got to unload the stuff from a ship that comes into port, and then you got to load it back on. So that creates jobs for people who work in the shipping industry. Although more often than not, it just gets more money for people who are in the shipping industry because you make money getting it in, you make money sending it out. And the Jones Act was also made passed and enacted as a means of maritime defense. Uh, and so, I mean, I get it, but the Jones Act is harming American citizens in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, all sorts of other places. And Virgin Islands is actually very important because this article from the New York Times pointed out how Hurricane Maria basically did what Hurricane Irma couldn't do in the Virgin Islands, and they've been hit extremely hard. And much like Puerto Rico, they have a debt crisis going on in the Virgin Islands. And just like Puerto Rico, everyone in the U.S. Virgin Islands are American citizens. But of course, they don't have the same rights that mainlanders or people in Hawaii or Alaska have. By that, I mean they don't have the right for equal representation in Congress. They don't have voting members in Congress, and they don't have the ability to vote for president or senator or anything like that. It's basically they get pretend representatives who sit in on committee, talk about things, but don't actually get to vote on bills. So yeah, I'm going to include in the links below a USA Today article that gives a lot of links to organizations you can donate to help the situation in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and basically anywhere that's been hit by these devastating hurricanes over the last few weeks. Do what you can. Since I haven't taken my new job yet, I don't have the funds to do so, especially with student loans. But anyone who watches this who does have the funds, please help out. Please donate. You'll do a lot of help for people who have been hit hard by these hurricanes. This is Josh with Cultural Catholic signing off.